Welcome to the Divine Lifestyles Podcast. I'm your host, Tara Magalski. Together with my guest experts, I cover topics ranging from cutting-edge healing modalities to hormonal harmony, to nutrition and plant medicine, to mindfulness and spirituality. My goal is to educate and inspire so you can create your own divine lifestyle. It's time to dive inward, rewire your brain, and heal from the inside out. I've got an exciting offer for all of my listeners. The free Divine Daily Practices video series. Get simple practices to release anxious thoughts, sharpen your intuition, and rewire your nervous system in less than 10 minutes a day. Come on over to my website at divinelifestyles.com/divine daily practices. And over the next week, you'll receive a complimentary self-care system to drop into your authentic self and activate your divine intuitive wisdom. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Divine Lifestyles Podcast. I am your host, Tara Magalski, and you might remember this guest, Dr. Nima Rahmany. This is part 2, because we had the most amazing conversation a few weeks ago, and now I want to go deeper. And today, I'm just going to remind you of who he is if you haven't forgotten. He's a leading expert in shadow work, emotional regulation, and healing attachment wounds. He is pretty amazing. And if you guys haven't listened to the first part 1, go back and listen to that after this. But today, we are going to dive into trauma response and emotional regulation. Yeah, let's go a little bit deeper into that, because I know our first interview, we were just going all these amazing places, and we ended up talking a lot about relationships. So
yeah, life is relational. It comes up in everything, whether it's a relationship with your body, whether it's a relationship with a substance, with your partner, with a child, or with your clients. That I believe that relationships is the space between us and another thing. And there's a lot that goes on that we don't really learn about. And we all want to create these amazing end goal experiences, which is all emotion based. So we can't talk about healing, emotional regulation, trauma bonding, trauma responses without talking about relationships.
I love that. So let's dive in. Let's talk about trauma bonding, since you brought it up. Yes, that's a good
one. Yeah, trauma bonding, Tara. It's a very highly polarized attachment that's usually it goes through cycles, and it's usually for the purpose of healing unresolved attachments as a child. So as a child, we have this one part where the child is raised not feeling seen by the mother, not being heard, not being validated, and creates this response in the child. There's 2 kind of solutions to the pain of not feeling seen, which is traumatic, right? Whether it was physical abuse or whether it was neglect, too much, too soon, not enough for a prolonged period of time, the child ends up feeling not seen. And this trauma, which is not about what happens to us, but what happens inside of us, the child has to cope. And it copes with one of 2 different ways. Solution number 1 is to turn inward, and that rage of not feeling seen, we can't express it to our caregivers, because that's going to result in us being even more disconnected. So we turn that rage inward, and it becomes kind of chronic depressive disorders, this heaviness, autoimmune type of stuff, digestive issues, anxiety, depression. The anger basically turned inward from the pain of not feeling seen, specifically by the mother, especially in the first 5 years of life, is really important. So what happens is that person basically then decides to adapt to that pain of not feeling seen by saying, you know what? In my environment, I'm going to be whoever I need to be in order to get my needs met. I will wear this mask, this false sense of self that will cater to my caregivers, to fawn, to people please, to abandon myself for the sake of attachment. And that is called codependency. That's kind of like the codependent type of identity. That's solution number one. Solution number two, guess what solution number two is, Tara, for not feeling seen from the trauma of the child? Solution number
Acting
two
out.
is that anger that you're feeling of not being seen gets externalized, acting out, and another false self is created, a mask that says, I'm going to create this perfect, grandiose kind of false self that is so amazing, that is top of the line, and be the best so that I can get all of those needs met by the many. And finally, I will be seen by creating this godlike kind of identity, which we call the narcissist. So what happens is this wound causes a split. And truthfully, we have a little bit of both when we have that wound. But the one who identifies more as the codependent, it's like a moth to a flame when you get older. And the codependent has these walls up, and the narcissist then begins the first kind of like wound. It's like this similar wound that they see one another. And the narcissist then, with this fear of abandonment, tries to get that adoration, that admiration from this narcissist who has from the codependent who has a very similar wound. But what happens is the narcissist strikes a deal with the codependent and says, you know what? I know that wound of not feeling seen. I'm going to become the mother that you didn't have because I see you. I see the little girl. I see the little boy in you. So in the masculine, the love bombing. In the feminine, narcissist would be sex bombing. So it works both ways, 50-50. And what's going to happen is I'm going to give you the validation and see you the way that your mother never did. And in exchange, you're going to become my mother. And what I'm going to unconsciously do is to hook you in and then discard you, devalue you, be abusive to you emotionally, physically, whatever, so that you can prove that you're my mother, because a mother would never leave her child. And so what happens is the love bombing phase hooks the codependent in, and now the codependent feels like they have love at first sight, but it's not actually love at first sight. They feel a sense of love to themselves for the very first time through the gaze of the other person. It's like I finally found. Basically, I feel this sense of they get drunk off of the validation. All right. Both of them are coming from a similar wound. They're acting it out. And now the first phase, love bombing. And then within about 6 months to a year, year and a half, there is a crisis of disappointment that happens where some sort of a truth comes out. And that love bombing then, after a trigger, becomes highly depolarized. And then that person that was pedestalized, this co-pedestalizing, now turns into like, you're the best thing, you're the greatest thing ever, you're the most amazing thing, you're amazing. Now you're the devil. You weren't what I thought you were. And then the discard period comes, the devalue, and then discard. And the codependent is lying there going, oh my gosh, what the heck happened? And the trauma bonding occurs the exact moment of the abrupt transition from the love bombing to the devaluing and the discarding. And now the codependent is hanging on every word, waiting for those moments of love bombing again, or sex bombing. What do I got to do? Who do I got to be to get that dopamine, that addictive validation with love, sex, intimacy, whatever it is? And so it becomes this little cat and mouse game where the narcissist becomes, the narcissistic one becomes like the rat in a cage, becomes like this little dangling carrots, and they're waiting for their next hit. And it becomes this, the second that the codependent says, that's it, I'm done, it triggers the narcissist abandonment wound, which then goes from devaluing, discarding, back to the love bombing phase, and eventually devaluing and discarding. And then it's very similar to this anxious and avoidant dance, but it's much more involved until their health turns to crap. It can become abusive, it can become violent, and it's exhausting, and it impacts people's health, and people sometimes it's where so much violence, abuse, murder, people, one of my friends a couple of years ago, he committed suicide after he went through a divorce and then went through this trauma bond push-pull dynamic. There's manipulation. There's the drama triangle with the victim and the perpetrator. They go back and forth with this dynamic, and it gets super duper messy. And it's what I lived in from the years 2017 to 2019, 2020, 2018. And things got abusive. I woke up from this and said, what the heck's going on? And I went through this process to untangle, moved on, got married. My ex then, filed a police report afterwards out of revenge, and went through this court system. And it's just, to untangle from a trauma bond is like getting rid of an addiction. And it's one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. And now that I've come through on the other side of it, I have a secure relationship, went through all of the court system. I pled guilty in actually a court of law to physical assault, fully took ownership of it, went through my healing process. And now, being on the other side of it, I've written a book about it, which comes out next year. And I help people break free from this toxic dance and create secure relationships so that family systems can be healed and we don't pass that on to the next generation. That's
Amen.
a mouthful.
Amen. What's the name of your book?
It's called Becoming Trigger Proof.
Well, that's right. We know that. We love that. We talked about that in episode 1. So, wow, lots to digest there. So tell us a little bit about children's response to trauma versus adults, and like what happens physiologically.
Yeah. So trauma is not what happens to us, but what's happening inside of us. And an ideal scenario, it's not what's happening to you, but it's what happens after that thing happens. Right? Do you have a network of do you have resources, which is inner resources of resilience, of friends, of family that you can turn to, of witnesses who are safe and say, I see you, I believe you. If we have those things, we can go through really difficult experiences. We can go through war. We can go through job loss. We can go through death. We can go through difficult periods, but because we have community of people who are co-regulators, who are safe witnesses, who are witnessing us, who are holding that energetic space and being able to help us process, post-traumatic stress can resolve and it doesn't become a disorder. So not everybody who goes through trauma will have a disorder. It depends on how resilient our systems are, how much resources that we have, not just friends and family, but how flexible our nervous systems are to go from activation, trigger, back home to safety, right? That's the ideal scenario because life is difficult. Right now in the recording of this, we're finding out about wars happening, bombs being dropped in the Middle East, and really bad news. And so if people are being supported and with community, and they've developed their own inner resources of capacity, what the word is called capacity, to contain a lot of energy and emotional charge, which is what trauma is, we can then go from activation and then open back up, right? We can go through protection and then we can open back up. But children are different. children do not have the capacity to regulate their emotions. It is the job of a parent. I have a 4-year-old son in the recording of this podcast. He does not come with instructions on how to regulate his emotions. It is up to parents to, when they have nervous system activation, when something big happens, a bicycle fall, they get picked on at school, something happens and they get big emotions, anger, upset, or they're having a tantrum, which is kind of a panic attack of a child, is a tantrum, is how regulated. The question is, how regulated is the parent while they're holding that space for the child to process their emotions? Are you able to sit with them, not try to fix them, but just say, hey, I'm here. I see you. I believe you. Let's breathe together a little bit. And to be a witness to this child and teach them that you can go into activation and then come back down into safety. That's the parent's job. But Tara, how often did we have unicorn parents? Are we raised with parents who understood the nuances of the nervous system, trauma responses? A child, like if in my case, a child who has big emotions or throwing a tantrum causes the parent to become activated. So they react to the child with more nervous system dysregulation. And then if the child is left by themselves, time out, being left to kind of like the Ferber method of going to sleep, where it's like sleep training, where they're left by themselves with this dysregulated state and nobody there to help bring them down, their nervous systems get the message that I'm bad, right? What I'm feeling is so painful emotionally that my only recourse is to leave my body. So they will do what's called dissociation, or they'll freeze. And it's basically a shutdown. It's a protective mechanism, a beautiful protective mechanism of our nervous system that's designed to protect us from pain, because we aren't with parents that teach us how to walk into the pain and how to get out. We just either we check out of it. If we don't have somebody to hold that space, we check out, and then we make up the story that instead of living in a world where my caregivers are malevolent, I would rather be the malevolent evil one in a benevolent world, in a world of goodness, than a good one in a bad world. That wouldn't be safe. So what we do is we are designed to abandon and betray ourselves and look at ourselves as the bad one, to cope with all of this charge when nobody was there to see us, hear us, validate us. And so this becomes trauma, and it's a very subtle trauma response. It's dissociation, but then we then develop or we were shamed. Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Stop being in such a bad mood. You should be grateful. And what happens, our feelings are rejected, repressed, denied, or dismissed. We then turn and parent ourselves the same way that we were parented. So a child's nervous system is very malleable. It's very fragile. And without the right guidance of a secure parent, or maybe the parents are involved in a trauma bond, there's codependency happening. And so the parent has gone through this really dark period where they're shut down, and the child doesn't feel what's called emotional attunement, mirroring an experience of being seen by mom or dad, because they're shut down because of their unconsciously codependent and narcissistic trauma bonded dynamic, which is most family systems. And so that then gets passed down to the child, who doesn't feel seen, doesn't feel heard, has this experience of familiarity with having to fight for love and approval. And that becomes the seed that's planted for how they're going to do relationships growing up. So our work as adults is to learn how that's happened and become the one to learn how to actively operate our machinery, learn to regulate ourselves, become trigger proof, and then turn our adult selves online so that we can raise children who aren't emotionally disconnected like it's happening.
Wow, it's so, so interesting. Are there certain types of people that are more? I know there's different types of trauma responses: the fight, the freeze, the flight, the fawn, and then also dissociation. But are there certain types of people that are more apt to have one type of trauma response?
It's whatever caused you to survive childhood. So
So, like, for example,
it,
for me, like, I would say I probably had fight, is
yes,
like what I feel, but
you're a fighter.
I have that fighter type of like, oh, edginess, right?
So the question for you then would be, did you have siblings? Did you have,
Yes,
okay. So are you the youngest sibling? What
I
was that?
am.
Okay, there you go. So why were you a fighter? Well, in order to survive your childhood, you had to adapt by becoming a fighter. So your question is, are there personality types? It's like, no. It's
Yeah.
what situation were you put in where you had to adapt? That's all it is.
But my next question is, so if I had that trauma response fight, is that pretty much the response I will have as I have more continued traumas throughout my life? Or could I have one where I freeze? Like, could there
Yeah.
be many different experiences? Or
Yeah.
do you have like a
So
go-to?
we have all of them.
Yeah.
Now, if you're in a relation, if you're with a friend or a coworker, or maybe your husband will trigger something which will bring you back to that childhood stage where you were kind of fighting with your siblings, you'll
Hmm.
go into fight. Does that
I
make
know.
sense?
Yeah.
So he'll elicit that, but it depends on the dynamic. Let's say you're an entrepreneur, right? You're an entrepreneur and now you have this client who is super duper wealthy and will be responsible for, you know, your income tripling in the next 2 years. Now, when that person triggers you, you're probably not going to fight them because it won't be advantageous to your business's survival. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
You'll probably go into a fawn response and say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, whatever it is, whatever you want. You'll abandon yourself and appease them because you're going to get your needs met. So it all is dependent on, am I going to get my needs met? It's like,
Mm.
like for example, we see this is one of my clients that I was working with, when she was in her teen, she was sexually abused by a family member, and he was very violent. And when he was abusing her, she went into a freeze response. Now she's normally a fighter, but in that moment, because she was encountering a predator, somebody who was coming at her, that running away would be dangerous and fighting would be dangerous. Well, guess what your system's going to do? You're going to go into freeze, because freezing causes your predator's nervous system to calm down. If you're fighting them, it would activate your predator. And so that will be dangerous to you, right? Somebody comes up to you and starts and grabs a knife and says, Tara, give me all your money. You're going to run. So that's flight. But somebody comes up to you with a gun and says, give me all your money.
Hmm.
If you run, you're in trouble. So you're going to freeze, and then you're going to fawn. You're going to say, oh, whatever you want. So we have all of them and we use them. The number one thing is safety. You're going to use whatever is necessary in each moment for safety. And it's up to you. If it's unresolved and you don't do your inner work on this, it will show up in relationship dynamics. And this becomes problematic because you're dating and you're a fawner because you need the attachment and you don't love yourself. The second that person you're dating and they say something to you or they want to make a move, you want to get sexual, immediately your body says no. But because you may want that connection or that connection is important to you, you will appease and give off a signal, possibly unconsciously. The signal that you're giving is, I'm a yes, but my body says no because I would rather lose myself than lose my attachment to you. And that's sexual fawning. And that happens so commonly. So it depends on the situation. We have to start framing these not as bad things, but as wise survival mechanisms in each moment that our nervous system unconsciously does to make sure that we are alive. But the problem is what kept you alive in childhood is going to sabotage your intimate relationships and your entrepreneurial spirit in the second half of life, because you'll get triggered by those unresolved wounds and then you'll be acting out of them and you'll be regressing like that child. And our work is to learn how to expand that space between stimulus and response, what I call becoming trigger proof, so that we can bring our adult self online and start acting from that place, that identity, rather than from that wounded child or adolescent.
So, how can someone recognize if they have this unresolved trauma that needs attention? Because I think a lot of times you think, oh, I've done the work, and then all of a sudden it'll take something to trigger you. But is there any other telltale signs?
Yeah. The
Besides
fantasy is, the fantasy is I done the work, so I should never be triggered. And that's bullshit. We all have unresolved woundings. Anytime there's reactivity, there's a wound. So there's no, I've done the work in past tense. It's an ongoing unfolding and there's never a finish line. And so it's really about learning a process so that when you get out of this fantasy of thinking that, oh, I've done the work, I'm there, you then have grown to the next level where you're going to get that triggered, which is an invitation for you to go and find these younger parts. And that's why I've kind of created a trigger proof process so that it's not about, I've done the work. It's about, I'm committed to having this as a lifestyle, kind of like exercise, kind of like, like Michael Jordan, when he was playing basketball, why did he rehearse? Why did he practice so much? Hasn't he done the work? Well, it's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing refinement. We are constantly, if we're living, we're raising children, we're running businesses, we're in relationships, we are constantly called on to grow. So we're getting triggered as an invitation to reconnect with these parts of ourselves that we have abandoned a long time ago just for finding safety on the outside. So healing is an ongoing unfolding, and the triggers reveal the parts of us that need our attention in that moment. But we hate that. We want there to be some sort of a magic bullet that says, oh, I never get triggered again. And that in and of itself sabotages and thwarts our recovery, because true recovery is when you're no longer judging that you get activated. You're able to spot it. You're able to create a process where you're notice the activation, and by meeting those parts of you with grace and compassion rather than, here I go again. That's when healing that's when we speed up the process of healing. By judging ourselves, we slow it down.
Very interesting. I was telling you that I went and did a ceremony in Oregon and I came out like super blissed out. And I've talked about it a bit on other podcasts, and I'll probably do like a solo podcast about the ayahuasca. So you come out and you're in this blissful state and you're like, oh, oneness, there's, only separation is in our mind. You're feeling all this. And then you get to the car and then you get triggered.
Yeah.
Right. And you're like driving. And so I was like, Tara, don't get triggered. So now I'm getting activated
Yeah.
And
And
I'm
now
like,
you're judging yourself for it, which is pushing you further away from
well, I
oneness.
say to myself, at first I was like, okay, don't do that. You just came from this amazing state, right? Let's stay in homeostasis. But what has been good about it is that it's just so clear to me. I get the awareness so quickly. I'm like, oh, that's silly. Don't get, and then I'm like, oh, I can like brush it off quicker, but still get triggered and still want to have that activation, then judge myself. But then I realize just roll it off. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
That's my process so far.
Yeah. That is, tell me if you're open to some feedback.
Yeah.
That's called spiritual bypassing. It's classic among the spiritual, cognitive and spiritual. Don't get so upset. In other words,
Well, it's
in other
myself.
words,
I'm like, it's not worth it.
yeah. In other words, you are, when you get triggered, a shadow part of you is coming up and it's wanting your attention. It's wanting understanding. But then what you're doing is like, just let it go. And what you're doing is you're pushing
I'm
it
judging
away.
myself,
You're
right?
judging yourself, right? Because you had this ayahuasca experience, which is a peak experience. I'm not opposed to that. And tell me if you're open to me sharing my take on this.
Yeah.
I love, retreats, um, you know, breath work, ayahuasca. I've done it all, and psychedelics. And there's nothing wrong with having these peak experiences. You get called to it. There's some sort of a intention you go into. But what I notice is when we live to create these weekend peak experiences where we need these substances to connect to the oneness,
Mm-hmm.
we then, that becomes a new ego or spiritual high and another thing to abandon ourselves with. Because what happens is you have this opening, which is great as long as it's intentional and you're using that alongside of your nervous system work to be able to access that oneness without a substance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So you have this experience like, there it is. And then the real work
Is much
is
after it's the
is
integration.
what you do on Wednesdays, on a Thursday morning, not what the weekend retreats is. How am I treating myself? And these shadow parts of me that will never go away, no matter how many ayahuasca journeys I do, these parts of me that have been exiled. And what you're doing is when you get triggered, they're looking to be seen and to be witnessed by you, but then you're just exiling them again. You're making them wrong and you're pushing them down. Just don't let it bother you because you're
Yeah.
experiencing emotional pain. So it's a natural instinct to avoid it. But true freedom, Tara, you're becoming trigger proof. It doesn't mean you're triggerless. It means I'm no longer judging or trying to avoid that emotional pain. I'm using that emotional pain. I'm increasing my capacity to sit in it and be with it without trying to escape, without trying to make sense of it, by finding those parts and bringing compassion to those parts and alchemizing. What that does is that it alchemizes that pain and it naturally turns into love. Like when you did your ayahuasca, I'm sure that a part of your journey was going into the darkness, was it not?
Not a ton, actually. I thought there would be more. But I mean, I
Okay.
definitely looked at shadow parts and things that were painful. But
Right. That's what
nothing
I'm
was
talking
dark.
about.
Nothing was
Right.
dark or
What
heavy.
what makes it, and so a lot of times it's there, what makes it so exhilarating in the oneness is making contact with the pain.
Yeah.
So I have now created a process within myself, and I teach to people in my community of cycle breakers how to stop running from those parts of me and learning how to make elegant and compassionate contact with it on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis as a practice, so that I no longer am governed by the outside world or trying to avoid a feeling. I'm governed by consciously choosing. Sometimes things are painful. marriage sometimes is painful. Raising a family, raising children sometimes can be painful. But I'm no longer avoiding pain to try to, I'm no longer avoiding pain. I'm no longer governed by the need to seek pleasure and avoid pain. I'm connected to the inspiration of my heart and living according to my highest values, which sometimes is about embracing pain along the path.
Oh yeah. I
So
like
it's about increasing capacity.
I like that. Yeah. And I also really liked what you said about it's not becoming triggerless, because that's kind of impossible. It's about becoming trigger proof. And I
Which
think that that's
means
a really important,
non-judgmental towards it.
yeah,
Exactly, Tara.
that's
You're getting
that's
it.
the
You're getting
key
it.
there. For me, that's the key. Like it's not about becoming triggerless. Um, yeah, my experience was really interesting. I just feel a lot lighter. And for
Yeah,
me, what I have, my takeaway is it's helped me to put into perspective who I want to be, if that makes sense, where I want to spend my time, what I want to do with my living, breathing moments that I have left.
totally.
Um,
Totally.
so
I
for
love
me,
that.
yeah, I got very clear, like, this is where I want to put my energy. This is where I no longer will put my energy.
This
Um,
is why a lot of people, I have an event, it's called the Overview Experience, and it's a 6-hour deep dive on Zoom. See that picture of
love
the Earth?
it.
And
Yeah.
what it is like the overview effect is the perspective shift that astronauts would feel when they would leave the planet.
Yeah.
They would go to outer space, they would look down and come and go, oh my gosh. And they come back and go, wow, who do I want to be? What do I want to do? And so the method that I teach is all about that perspective shift, but
Yes.
it's actually it's the same journey without the need for the psychedelics,
I
which I'm
like
not
it all.
opposed to. So
Yeah.
that's why I call it the overview effect, because it is a perspective shift that's a cognitive and a somatic tool that takes you right to make contact towards the painful parts that you've been avoiding, so that once you integrate them, you become this whole person and you get clarity on who you are and what you want to do. The reason why you didn't have that clarity before was that there were parts of you that were painful, that you were
Resisting.
conveniently kind of blocking or avoiding or resisting. I love that word. And
Yeah.
so the medicine, drop the resistance, drop the protective parts. That's what the medicine does. The
Mhm.
medicine drops the protectors so that you're not protecting yourself from the pain. You're making contact with it. And there you have this kind of like an integrative experience where you feel wholeness and oneness. And I love that. I love that, sometimes people need that. I wanted to be able to get that without having to
Do the medicine.
take that stuff so
I
often.
love
I'm
it.
not opposed to it, but when you come
Have
to the
you done
overview
it?
experience, I've done ayahuasca before, 2017. But when people finish the overview experience, they're like, I feel like I just went on an ayahuasca journey. I'm like, pretty cool, huh?
That's awesome. Did you get the download on your ayahuasca journey to create this?
No, I had it before, but just I was curious because a lot of my clients, like you, they try it. I'm like, well, I want to try it to see what it is, and I get it. And I was like, I understand. And when I understood shadow work, it's just a
Mhm.
day-to-day practice, moment-to-moment practice where you're using your triggers to find those painful parts that we are just habitually avoiding, so that we can get that level of wholeness and live that way on a Wednesday rather than having to go to a shaman and in Peru or wherever you are, and then find that experience of oneness. And then life becomes seeking these peak experiences, and we start to
Yeah,
where we need to have altered states to really enjoy it. You can lean on that a little too much. And so in the
for sure.
psychedelics, I've been in communities where they do it so often. It's like the new drug addiction of
I know.
2025. The old druggies have now turned to psychedelics. It's just it's
A
a way of getting
transfer of
high.
addiction, right? It's just a transfer of
Exactly.
addiction.
Yeah.
I
So
think,
I'd like to use it. I like to be able to have that control myself and be able to see the oneness within. So that's
yeah,
why the overview method I can create it.
I think that that's amazing. And I think that that's really important to have that, especially when after integration. But I personally, from my experience, think that sometimes you need a cracking.
100%.
And for me, that's what I needed. And it's not for everyone. But if it's really speaking to you, then follow that call. Because for me, I needed that. And now I'm like, okay, I understand what needs to
Yeah.
be worked on
Yeah.
now. And
Sometimes
it's
there's so
giving me
much
clarity.
dissociation that to have that experience opens you up, but to make sure that you have the resources around you and you're building your inner resources, because you could have kind of like a psychotic break as well. There's always risks to everything, right? I'm glad
Yeah,
you had such a great experience.
the only time that I thought I'd love to share this with you because it was really interesting. I wrote about this was the only time that I was like, oh, it was actually in the medicine journey. And I was thinking, this is where people have psychotic breaks. It was only because of the veil was so thin and there was no time, space, and dimensions and realities and timelines were blending. So there was multiple dimensions and things, and all things were happening at the same time. So reality, the matrix, I was like, am I cracking the matrix? Like, I was like, where am
It's
I?
hard to explain. Yeah.
Am I here?
Who
Am I
am I?
here?
Where am I?
Or
Yeah.
is it there? Because that happened yesterday and I can't tell. I mean, I thought it happened yesterday, but it's happening simultaneous. It was like dimensions and timelines were blending. Then, of course, the ego stepped in and was like, how long is this going to last?
Yeah.
Where am
And
I? Open your eyes.
that's such a cool experience. And I love learning skills where I can kind of dance with my ego on a day-to-day basis as a parent, as a husband, as a leader, right? So I always say pills don't teach skills. And so while it's great to have those, while it's great to have these kind of like peak experiences and altered states, I really want to, I'd be irresponsible of me not to say that we need to learn the skills so that we could find kind of like learn how to drop that ego, get vulnerable, learn how to recognize when we're in the pattern so that we can see the pattern clearly and then start to change that default mode network of constantly going into the same reactivity. And so that is a skill that needs to be learned. And these peak experiences and altered states are fantastic openers. And it's really important for me to share how we must learn them if we want to have secure relationships, if we want to feel safe in our skin, and we want to trust ourselves more, because the triggers are going to happen right away. Right. So it's like, oh my God, I got triggered again. I was in this blissed out state. Life is not about staying in this peak experience. And so it's about how can I live how can I stay grounded within myself when it's difficult? And that's the skill of becoming trigger proof. That's really important for me to share.
I love it. No, I think it's beautiful. I already have a vision of a nice retreat that you can come and be a part of.
That'd be fun.
I'm going to do one out in Mount Shasta next September. So maybe that's planting a seed there. So
Beautiful.
let's just get like really tactical and practical. So give me a strategy right now. So I'm blissed out. I'm now triggered. What am I doing? Walk me through it.
Right.
I'm in the car.
So
screaming.
Really, the skill that I teach with my cycle breakers, I just got off a call just right now. We were going through a scenario where, aging parents, kid who's having challenges, teenager is having emotional problems and getting into trouble with online dating people that she's not supposed to. Like, they're coming up, and what's happening is something outside of you is happening. And because of that external thing, there's a reaction happening inside of you And what we're doing is we are externalizing the blame that that thing out there is going on. And I need that thing out there to change so that I don't feel my emotional pain. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We go through relationships with this. This is how we do life. And what we're doing is unconsciously, we're giving away our power. We're basically externalizing our energy with that, and becoming trigger proof and learning how to shift that narrative is to really take responsibility and go, all right, that outside thing is happening. The situation is in front of me. Whether they cut me off, whether I just discovered my partner's having an affair, whether I am having challenges with my teenager, inside, there's an emotional pain happening. And there's an appraisal that's unconscious that's happening. And the question is, what am I making that mean about me? So if you're giving me a hypothetical, it's not going to be great. So let's do one that really triggered you, Tara, and I'll walk you through the process so that you can start to rewire the meaning that you're making out of it, and then reclaiming the power that you're giving away unconsciously in that activation.
Yeah, so for me, it was being in the car and driving. It was a little bit of like a road rage that I was triggered.
Yeah. And
And
was somebody cutting you off, or was traffic
they were
going
like not
slow?
letting me in. They were being like a
Okay.
rude, my
Perfect.
opinion, a rude driver.
Perfect. In that moment, when somebody's cutting you off, when they're being rude, there's an inherent wound in there that we all feel when someone cuts us off. Our body goes into threat. So when you're being cut off, or they're being whatever, what were you making that mean about you? It's an I am statement that was not in your conscious, but what we're doing is we're making the
I am
unconscious
not
conscious.
safe. That
Right.
I am not safe would be what just comes up.
Of course, you definitely felt like there was a threat.
Yeah.
I'm not safe is the judgment, but look in the fact that they did that to you. What kind of a person does somebody act rudely to? Somebody who's what?
Maybe somebody who's a pushover.
Bingo. So someone who's weak,
Weak.
somebody who's unworthy.
Mm.
Bingo. Now, what's happening? This is the discovery that I made years ago. Beneath every trigger. So, I mean, have you ever driven, and have you ever been on the road and then accidentally cut somebody off?
Of course.
Or you were in a rush and you just weren't looking, and God forbid, God knows I've done that many times.
Yes, of course.
Were you judging them as weak or unworthy when you were doing that?
Of course not.
No. What were you doing?
Just going about my way.
I was like, time scarcity. I got to freaking get to that thing, and it's busy, and let me just go. It's not because they're unworthy. It's because I was in a fearful state. Okay. Remember that. That's the external situation. But internally, you didn't feel safe because you felt, I am, what kind of a person do people treat that way? Somebody who's what?
Like you said, weak, or somebody
weak or unworthy. Bingo. So who's calling you unworthy or weak?
Myself.
Bingo. So get this. Every time you get triggered, Tara, and I'm committed
I'm
to
worthy.
teaching. Every time you get triggered, unconsciously, you abandon and betray yourself. And you blame the external thing for your own self-abandonment. Becoming trigger proof is about making that unconscious dance, which is just a conditioning since you were a child, conscious, finding that younger part of you that felt unworthy, and then giving them the worthiness and the validation and the empathy and the understanding that they're looking for from that person in the other car. And not needing them to change anything for them to feel that. Does that make sense? So what's happening
No,
is,
it does.
I'm not worthy. That's your own self-abandonment. You've given them the power, and you're needing them to apologize so that you're not feeling that emotional pain. In other words, what you're unconsciously saying is, here's the power of my energy. You have it in your hands. I've just given it away to you. And becoming trigger proof is about reclaiming it back. Now, integrating that, and then having the conversation. Hey, you're a bit of an asshole there. Just letting you know.
Is there any sort of emotional regulation technique?
That's part of it.
Is there anything
dropping like into the body,
like breathing,
feeling it? The second it comes up and you're feeling it, just stop blaming, just feel, instead of going, oh no, just get over it. You just were in a blissed out state, Tara. Stop thinking that. Don't fucking do that. Drop in and go,
breathe.
I'm angry. I'm feeling angry. What am I making it mean? I'm not worthy. And here's this is very counterintuitive. You must feel the unworthiness. You must feel the weakness instead of trying to avoid it and pretend it's not there. So what you do is you surrender to the I'm weak. You surrender to the I'm unworthy for about 60 to 90 seconds. And what that does is that it alchemizes the trigger, much like you did in your ayahuasca journey when you went into the pain and then came out. If you don't go into the pain, then you don't come out. It just carries with you. So we must go into the pain. We should surrender to it 30 to 60 seconds.
Feel to heal. Feel to heal.
Essentially, that's what it is. It's very counterintuitive, and you're going to forget tomorrow because you're going to go into avoidance because that's part of the conditioning.
Yeah.
But training to rewire this causes you to feel safe in your body, no longer externalize your power, be able to bring your adult self back online, become more of a secure person. You become healthier. Your anxiety levels go down. You trust yourself more. You start to expand your capacity. You become more resilient. And it's counterintuitive, but it's a powerful process to learn.
I love it. I love it. I'm super excited to have you come into the collective and teach this. This is going to be really exciting. Okay, we're going to close up here, but I wanted to ask you 2 more questions.
Sure.
So how can a loved one who has or a caregiver that you're supporting someone during a trauma response without inadvertently triggering them further? So and I love to ask this question because I hold space for a lot of people, especially during my retreat. So it's how do you care for someone?
Mm-hmm.
I think I know what my gut is, but I'd love to hear what you have to say. Someone's having
so let's say I'm at a retreat.
Yeah.
And you're going through a trauma response. What's going to happen is this might bring up the younger version of you, Tara, that needed to take care of mom as a child. And so you will leave yourself to take care of somebody, and you're actually now reenacting your own traumas through them. Unless you notice that, you feel the constriction in your body, drop into your breath, feel it, and then find, how old is this part of me? I feel like I'm 8 trying to look after my mom. And you unconsciously connect to that younger part of yourself first and say, I see you. I've got you. And once you connect to that part and let that part of you feel held by you, the way you hold space for others, you take care of her first. Now, when you hold space for somebody else, you're not abandoning yourself to do it. You're not enmeshed with them because you now have conscious empathy. Unconscious empathy is, I'm going to leave myself and be completely swarmed in your emotions. Those they're called empaths. Right? I'm going to leave my frame and take care of you because just like when I was a kid. Conscious empathy is I connect to ground myself first, and then I hold space for you. And I'm a safe witness to you, but I'm not oriented to you. There's the distinction between orienting to them, which is codependency, and being a witness. So you can't help someone if you're orienting to them because you're making their emotions about you.
Yeah.
But Being a safe witness to them is orienting to me while I'm witnessing you. The language is important.
I love that. Are there any kind of emerging trends that you're seeing in the emotional healing and trauma
Yeah.
work that are like exciting?
Yeah. Trends is people are starting to wake up and realize that the main issue is not what's happening to us, but our reaction, our response, or our beliefs about what's happening to us. And the biggest thing that I'm seeing that I'm now taking care of is people are waking up to the fact that enmeshment trauma is literally the root cause of it all. The real problem is not having elegant boundaries, protective boundaries around your emotions and someone else's. So their experience becomes yours. And you can't have separation with that. And so you can't have a healthy relationship when you are inseparable emotionally from someone. It destroys intimacy. And by healing enmeshment trauma, we can now have secure relationships. This is what has been trending in my community. And I love teaching people who are really ready to do that work.
I love that. So where can the audience find you online, learn more about your community, your book, all the
Yeah.
things?
I will leave you a link for the attachment style quiz. That's the best place to begin. And also a link for a free mini course called Bringing Your Adult Self Online. I'll get my team to get that to you and put it in the show notes so that it's kind of like a little mini course that helps kind of guide you into this awareness. And yeah, just feel free to email me after, you get the results, send me an email, give me your backstory, and I'm happy to serve.
Thank you so much for being here today. Of course, was exceptional. I always love just vibing with you and chatting and getting your perspective. It's
good
a
times
lot of wisdom.
always, Tara. Thank you so much, Tara.
Here. Thank you for listening to this episode of Divine Lifestyles Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you get your episodes. If you really loved this episode, screenshot it and share it on social media. It will help us to continue to make an impact. With gratitude and love always, keep illuminating your path.